You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 16.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast, discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi, everyone. I hope you had a fantastic holiday, and I send you my best wishes for the new year. It's so great to be back behind the mic, and I'm really excited about what I'm working on for you guys in the year 2019. It was really fun to look back at the amazing guests that graciously agreed to speak with me this fall, and if this is your first time listening to the show, I encourage you to check out the past episodes because this all-star lineup of incredible musicians offered amazing and priceless advice and insight. You can hear from violinists James Ennis, Nathan Cole, and Holly Mulcahy, violists Matthew Lipman and Marina Thibault, bass players Jason Heath and Kaveh Rastagar, flutist Mimi Stillman, horn players Denise Tryon and Mark Gelfo, soprano Wallace Junta, trumpet player Paul Merkello, percussionist Jason Haheim, composer Jim Stevenson, and the last but definitely not the least, the fantastic performance psychologist Don Green. In the next few weeks, you're going to hear from New York Phil clarinetist Anthony McGill, trombone player Nick Platoff, pianist David Jalbert, violinists Amy Beth Horman and Emmanuel Abraham, cellist and meditation teacher David Eby, and many more in the months to come. Today, I'm so excited to start the new year with a wonderful guest, violinist Chloé Trevor. Chloe is quickly becoming one of the most talked about and sought after musical ambassadors to the new generation of violinists. Critics have acclaimed her for her dazzling technique, excellent musicianship, tone, poise, and professional grace, and for her bold personality, unafraid to exult in music and ability. She's appeared as a soloist with orchestras and in recitals worldwide. She spreads musical wisdom and her message of positivity to her hundreds of thousands of online followers. And she has founded the Chloe Trevor Music Academy, an intensive 2-week program for string players and pianists with the mission of helping young musicians develop the life skills and musical tools necessary to become healthy and well-rounded artists. If you're not already a follower, check her out on Instagram at Chloe Trevor _violin, where she posts about practicing and performing, posting videos and giving out awesome detailed technical instructions, and doing this with great humor and a truly wonderful musical insight. Chloe and I discuss practicing and performing from several perspectives. We talk about dealing with injuries, practicing mindfully, how making practice videos can really help us progress faster, how to prepare for performances, and many other things. As you'll be able to tell, I had a great time talking with Chloe. She has so many wonderful tips and tricks in store for you, and I know you will enjoy this episode. Let's go to the show. Chloé Trevor, it's truly wonderful to have you on the show today. I've followed you on Instagram for about 3 years now, and there's so many things I love about what you do. First of all, begins with fantastic violin playing and musical artistry, but I find that you convey so much enthusiasm for what you do, and you're so generous with your fans. You constantly post awesome videos of all kinds. Some are of your performances with orchestras. Some are really funny little musical clips that you put together. And there's a great number of practice videos where you teach your fans and give them incredibly detailed practice tips and answer all of their questions. And I love the way you reach out and connect with your audience, and you do it in the way that is so engaging and offers them so much value. I'm really excited that we have this chance to talk today.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet to hear. I'm really excited to be on the show as well.
As I've mentioned, you're a wonderful violinist and you know a ton on how to practice mindfully and efficiently. But before we dive into this nitty gritty of practicing, I'd love to hear your story in your own words. So, can you please walk us through your musical journey and how you got to where you are today and how that path has unfolded for you?
Yeah. Let's see how succinct I can make this. So my parents are both musicians. My mom was a violinist in the Dallas Symphony Orchestra from the early 80s. And my father, Kirk Trevor, is a conductor. He conducts orchestras all around the world. And he was the assistant conductor to Eduardo Mata when he met my mom in the Dallas Symphony. And so they were always kind of looking for little violins for me. My dad secretly always wanted to play the violin when he was younger, although he ended up playing the cello because that was the only instrument left for him. And my parents said that I would watch my mom practice a lot. And so they always thought it'd be fun to find a little baby violin for me, which they did find when I was about a year. And when I was a year and a half, they found one that actually played. And I would kind of carry it around a lot as a little security blanket type thing. And my mom would help me, play some open strings and play little songs on it and things, which I started taking more serious lessons probably when I was about 3. And my mom taught me until I was 8 or 9, when I then started studying with another violinist in the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, Arkady Fomin. And I studied with him until I went to college. And during this time, I started having multiple lessons a week with him, 2 to 4 lessons, 2-hour lessons every time a week, and started having a lot of concerts, started traveling internationally for performances, started winning competitions, kind of traveled the world from the age of 12 through college, and felt like I kind of had a pretty strong career going at that point, which then stopped once I got to college, which was kind of funny because then you get to college and then you have no time to do anything, right?
Yeah, you have to do papers on Mahler symphonies.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music for my undergrad degree, and I studied with David and Linda Cerrone there. And then I went to the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University, where I did my master's studying with Kenneth Goldsmith. And after that, actually during my master's, I went through a pretty intense time in my life where I actually ended up having to take off about a year from playing violin because of playing injury that was related to just my body type and things that were kind of going on with my hands that were just the way that my body's built. So it was like a perfect storm kind of situation where, well, your hands do this and you play violin, so you're going to have this problem kind of thing. And that came to a head during my master's. Took off some time from school, took off time from playing, stopped performing, wasn't actually sure if I'd ever be able to play again. And during this time, I started teaching about 30 to 40 students a week because I had nothing else to do. And found that I really, really loved teaching. I've been teaching, honestly, since I was about 12 or 13, but it wasn't until that moment when that was all I did that I really discovered what a passion I had for it. So when I then got back into playing, which was in 2013, I combined all of my teaching and performing and kind of relearning how to play the violin with Instagram, because 2013 was also when I started my Instagram account. And so I started posting things about violin, about teaching, about practicing, about concerts, about everything in my life that was music related, and suddenly found that I had an audience there, which I didn't expect at all. I kind of just started Instagram for myself as a kind of maybe photo journaling kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it really grew into something very unexpected. So from that point, I got back into doing concerts and into playing recitals and now creating the Chloe Trevor Music Academy, which honestly really grew out of Instagram, is kind of a culmination of all of what I just described, which is pretty amazing. And here I am today.
That's great. I love how your story is such a great illustration of someone who had some obstacles in her way, and really, it sounds to me like you really made the best out of it. And I think it's Perlman who says, when you teach, you learn. And what you said, teach, you brought this back into your own playing. And I saw a bunch of those videos about where you talk about the hand injury. And unless I'm wrong, it's you have to deal with hyperflexibility as well, correct?
Yes.
I definitely send all of my students who deal with that to your videos. And I say, check out her account. She's got some great videos on this hyperflexibility that you're dealing with. And and I think it's such a great illustration of that, of really taking what life throws at you and growing out of it and contributing back to community. As you say, it's unexpected, but it's really great for us because you're bringing us so much value, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's good to know about your students. I should probably post a lot more on the hypermobility issue and dealing with injury and all those kinds of physical stress things. I haven't posted a lot about it just because, or more when I was, a few years ago, because there's more of a stigma around being a quote unquote injured musician,
Mm-hmm.
But really, and that's something that really bothers me, because one of the reasons that I was injured for as long as I was because of the stigma, and because you're not allowed to talk about it. And, because you're not allowed to talk about it, then you don't find help.
Exactly.
Because the people that could help you, you're not talking to. So when kids message me, I always try to give them as much advice as I can, when they send me direct messages about pain or injury or things like that. But I've been wanting to, for about a year or two, start posting a lot more about my experience with that and talk about it. There's not enough awareness around this issue, and it's probably one of the most important issues for musicians, to be honest, or any athlete, but especially musicians, because I think musicians, more so than athletes, are, it's a taboo subject.
Absolutely.
So that's something I've thought about more. Yeah.
And it's not something that's talked about a lot. And for example, I don't have hyperflexibility. Therefore, a student who is dealing with it, it's great for me to know that I know someone I can reach out to and ask about it and get information from, because it's a completely different way of approaching the mechanism of the fingers. And the more people talk about it, the more conversation there is about it, then the more tools all of these students can develop and acquire.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really important.
You mentioned the Chloe Trevor Academy. I'd love to hear more about that. Can you tell us about it a little bit?
Oh my gosh. How much time do you have? The Chloe Trevor Music Academy is a 2-week summer festival for string players and pianists ages 12 and up currently. We're going to see how it evolves over the next couple of years. This is currently 2019 will be our second year. So we're still in the beginning stages, but it's already really exciting. String players and pianists, pre-college, college students, and we're working on opening up a kind of adult auditing program for those who don't really fit into the student or college age categories but still want to learn. And we have so many different programs. We have orchestra, we have chamber music, we have private lessons. There are so many master classes with our amazing guest artists and faculty. I'm really super excited about our Eurythmics class, which is taught by Sonia Hu, which is she's one of the teachers at the Cleveland Institute of Music. And Eurythmics was one of the best things that I got out of being at CIM. So I was like, definitely needs to be at my camp. And she's fantastic. We also have theory and ear training for the pianists. We have, piano literature, piano history, collaborative classes, duo classes. There are a lot of seminars that we have about career guidance type things about social media, things about practicing, things about auditioning for schools, auditioning for orchestras, just all those kind of topics that kids want to know about. And we also have, we have conducting classes. And we have recitals and a lot of concerts for the kids to attend. And I'm not quite sure how we fit all of this into 2 weeks, but we did it last year and it was crazy. And right now it's being held at Stephen F. Austin State University, which is in Nacogdoches, Texas. East Texas, about 2 hours east of Dallas. Next year, it will be held from July 28th to August 10th. And our registration just opened recently. So we have early registration going until January 15th, and then we'll still be taking applications through, I believe, May 1st. And we're really excited to see the kids that we have this year. Last year, we had 100 students attend from 10 different countries.
Wow.
Which is pretty fantastic. I did not expect for our first year at all. But we have, a scholarship fund so that we can help kids that are, coming from other countries or those who are, in the States but can't necessarily afford the tuition. Although we have made the tuition extremely affordable. My biggest passion is making music education affordable and available to everyone who wants it. Because I know on Instagram, I hear from kids all the time saying that they can't afford private lessons, or they can't afford an instrument, or they can't afford to go to a camp. They can't afford all these things that they would need to be able to basically have a career and be successful, right? They have the motivation and the desire there, but maybe limited funds for, whatever reason. And so I said, well, we're going to have a 2-week camp. We're going to make it, as affordable as possible. So we have tuition at $1,400 right now, which comes out to $700 a week. And I think with the amount there's like 100 to 120 hours of training, I think, that goes into the entire camp. So you break that down and it comes out to a very reasonable price.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. I really hear your enthusiasm and, the sense of mission that drives you with this project. And I think it's so great that it seems to be such a thorough and all-encompassing experience. And I was seeing some posts from last year's session, and it looks like so much fun.
Yeah, the kids are really excited. They're all like, when does the registration open so we can apply for next year? And I'm like, here it is.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it was really exciting. It was like a dream come true this past summer. I couldn't believe it when it all came together, just watching it. It was really amazing.
That's fantastic. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes for the registration and the website for the Academy.
That would be fantastic.
Chloe, you're a seasoned performer and you tackle the most difficult repertoire and play recitals and concert with orchestras all over the US and the world. And I think we can learn so much from hearing about practicing and performing from your angles. So I hope you're ready because I have many questions for you.
Go at them.
First, I'm curious to find out what you think broadly of mindfulness. What is mindful practice to you? You mentioned teaching from a young age and having to deal with the injury, and I can only imagine that it brought a lot of mindfulness in your own practice. So I would love to hear your opinion on this big topic. Sorry to start with such a big question.
That's okay. Mindful practice is definitely one of the most important aspects of becoming a successful musician, because anyone can sit in a room and practice mindlessly for hours and hours and get literally nowhere, which I actually have personal experience with. There have been many times in my teenage years where it was very much quantity over quality, where I just thought if I put in the hours, then that was all I needed to make it work. To a degree, you do need, you need both, because there is an aspect of muscle memory and teaching training your body how to do something. But if you don't have the hours without the mindfulness, then you're not learning anything. And that took me a little bit of time to understand. I think because I'm very driven and motivated to just kind of look at numbers in terms of like, how many numbers can I log into this, instead of getting into the nitty gritty, what's going to really help me. So that took me a while, which I think I started to learn more honestly. I think when that year off that I had to take from playing violin, where I was only teaching, because during that time I had to really start explaining to students how to practice efficiently and effectively. like the quote that you were saying about Perlman before, I definitely learned a lot about myself and my own playing and how to practice efficiently and how to practice mindfully from teaching. So I think everyone definitely needs to spend a significant amount of time teaching their instrument in some capacity, whether that's, just finding a friend, like if you're a teenager, if you're 15 and you find one of your friends that wants to learn how to play an instrument, like try to teach them how to play that instrument, for free, not as like a teacher, but let's try to figure out how to teach someone to do what you do, because it'll make you think about it differently. So that's definitely one of the aspects of mindful practice. I think also another aspect of mindful practice for me that I really started to learn in college was practicing scales. I actually think that I may be the most mindful about my practicing when I'm playing scales, because I discovered just how many things you can think about and focus on and really kind of zone into when practicing scales. Things like using your entire bow. Do you go all the way to the frog? Do you go all the way to the tip? Which tone lane are you in? Are you getting the best sound all the time? Are there shakes in your sound? How are you holding your bow? How are you doing vibrato? How are your fingers landing on the strings? How are your shifts? Are they smooth or not? Are you hearing your bow changes, or are they, hidden? Is it in tune? Is your vibrato beautiful? I think I've come up with a list of 30 to 50 things that I can think about while practicing scales. And that is really great practice for me, because I do that at the beginning of every practice session. And if I get used to being in that kind of mental zone, it'll help me for the rest of my practicing. So to kind of, take those things from practicing scales over into the rest of my practice, which is really helpful for me.
I love what you just said about the scales, because I also had at a certain point in my life practice scales mindlessly, but now I can really tell when a student comes in and they've played scales all week or they've practiced scales all week, because it sounds completely different. Because as you mentioned earlier, you can walk in the room and play scales for 20 minutes without actually solving anything. But it's when you really start to make the scales sound as beautiful, as musical, not in the sense of, using full vibrato and all of these things, but, a beautiful sound, beautiful bow stroke. This really translates in the playing later on. And that's actually, a great segue for my next question, which was going to be about your practice process. How, if you can unwrap your process for us a little bit, and, what does a practice session looks like for Chloe Trevor? I know they're all different, but, maybe give us a general idea.
Well, I can give you what my ideal session would be, and then I can give you what a more realistic one looks like, because I think I can do the ideal ones sometimes, but I just don't typically have enough time for them.
I love that. Let's do it.
Yeah, an ideal practice session for me starts with anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of scales. And I really love practicing scales at the beginning, because it gets my fingers so ready to do everything else. And if I don't put in, the more time I put into scales at the beginning, the better the rest of my practice session feels. So I always like to get as much of that in there. Doing, the acceleration method of starting with really, really slow single bows all the way to playing one or two scales in one bow. And then going into thirds, going into octaves, sixths, harmonics, all of those, and arpeggios. The more of that I can do, the better I feel. But that doesn't happen very often. Usually I only get in, well, I'll talk about that one after, but around 30 minutes to an hour of scales. And then I love to be able to play some sort of etude after that, whether that's a part of a Paganini caprice or something from, the Fiorillo or Don't etude books, or any of the other etude books that are out there. Just kind of go through something, and I might pick something that feels familiar, or I might pick something that I kind of want to sight read through and get my fingers used to something new. Doing that for maybe another half hour. And then I love to be able to play some Bach, because that gets my fingers into another whole, more like a chordal kind of position, depending on which one I'm playing. But generally, my hand feels different when I play Bach. And so I like to always get in a movement or two of Bach for a half hour to an hour or so. Although sometimes when I get onto Bach, I could end up being there for a couple hours.
Yeah, and I love that term you just used, chordal frame, for your hand, because it's really what it is. And if you can have this frame ready that just, it carries through fast passages and lyrical passages for, use of vibrato and all that stuff. I love that term. I'm going to start using it.
Okay. Yeah, really, like Bach and scales, if you get some of those in every day, like it really just starts solidifying all of your intonation, like so much better than anything else, in my opinion. Then after doing some Bach, I like to play through something that is super, super familiar to me, whether that's a showpiece or another kind of etude. Sometimes I like to just play through something like Sarasate's Introduction and Tarantella, or maybe something like Zigeunerweisen, or something that I've played for years and years, and just kind of get myself into that zone where my hands are already warmed up, so that I don't have to think too much about that, and I can just play through something and feel solid with it and feel the musicality coming through. I've learned a lot over the past 4 or 5 years about how your mental state and how your brain responds differently to things that feel familiar as opposed to things that feel, new and unfamiliar. And sometimes, which is also the reason I start with scales, sometimes just getting my hands and my brain synced up to doing something that I'm so used to, my hands start feeling really solid and really sure of themselves, and my brain, like, anxiety comes down. Sometimes if I don't have a lot of time to practice something and I have to jump into something that feels new and not super secure, my heart rate goes up. My hands don't feel solid. They feel kind of shaky. They feel like there's like live wires in them that makes them feel like they're moving more than they really are. I don't know if that makes any sense. This is something I've been learning a lot about this over the last few years, when I've had to relearn how to play my instrument basically over the past few years. And when I came back to it and played things, I'd sometimes feel like I've played this for years, but suddenly my hands don't feel good. And it would be the most like terrifying feeling, which would then become a vicious cycle where the anxiety would make my hands feel worse. And then my hands feeling worse would make my anxiety worse, if that makes sense. So it was like this stress reaction. So if I can play something that I know that I know that I know that I know, it kind of sets my brain and brings the anxiety and stress down to have a really productive rest of my practice session, which after that I'll go into something, one of my concertos or recital pieces or something, try to pick a few passages that I really need to work on, do them slowly, figure out how to practice them effectively and efficiently, maybe find a passage that I want to record for an Instagram video, either just for a video or for like a practice teaching video, because honestly doing those helps me practice better, which is why I always tell the students, I'm like, you want to learn how to practice better, start posting things on Instagram from your practice sessions. It's kind of funny how that works, but which is one of the main reasons I do it. It actually helps me practice better. And then I typically would also like to wrap up with another movement of Bach or something before I put everything away. So that's like my ideal practice session. What my average practice session looks like is probably something more like 10 to 20 minutes of scales, depending on how much time I have. And then maybe a movement of Bach, and then kind of jump into whatever I need to work on. So it's really not ideal. I try to find a balance between those two things where depending on how my hands are feeling that day, I might spend more time in scales or trying to get everything to feel a little bit more solid and secure. And if they're feeling good, then I might be able to jump into, a Shostakovich concerto or Cacciatorian concerto or something and just do a little bit of, woodshedding on a passage that's giving me trouble, or slow practice to work on some intonation or something. But
I love that, because it's like you say, we always, all of us out there, we think that there's time for the ideal practice session, but in reality, those days are rare. And it's such a great incentive to learn how to practice efficiently.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I love that idea of playing the piece that you know really well right after your Bach and before. One thing I talk with the students is this idea of priming, to, preparing both physically and mentally for the practice, setting up the space so you have everything you need and you're comfortable, but also taking the time to identify your goals and maybe make a little plan of what you want to practice. But that sounds like another form of priming, to where you just like kind of building this physical and mental confidence in your playing. And I'm guessing there are pieces that you enjoy as well. So it's like bringing this joy and this fun in the practice session. I think it's such a great way to put yourself in the prime state for work. I love that. I'm going to have to try it during one of my next perfect practice day sessions.
Aren't those great when you have those? I'm always telling students, I think a lot of kids think that once they get to college, they'll have time to practice because they're so busy, like in high school and stuff. And I'm like, you won't have time to practice once you get to college. Or they think that if they're in college, they're like, well, I'll have time to practice after college. I'm like, no, you won't.
Nope, never.
I mean, so I'm trying to tell them to, practice as much as possible before college. To me personally, that means even taking off a year or two before going to college, maybe, if that's an option, and that practicing as much as you possibly can before college, combined with, figuring out how to practice efficiently, because that ultimately is the most important thing.
And it's so true what you say about recording those videos for Instagram, because it's a form of performance. Well, it is a performance, and it just intensifies the focus in the practice, I feel like.
It does. It does a lot of different things, honestly. And I know that you had, we'll discuss things about performing later on too, but recording videos does so many things for you in terms of being able to listen back to what you've just played really easily. I mean, I record 99.9% of my videos on my phone so that I'm able to listen back to them really easily instead of using some kind of DSLR camera, which would be more complicated. So, you can record, listen back, record, listen back, record, listen back, and hear that didn't actually sound like I thought it did, either in a positive or a negative way, usually negative, where I'm like, oh, I thought I did that better. Guess not, So you start learning from that, what your audience hears when you play, which I imagine back, 100 years or something, or not even that far, obviously. Like, it wasn't that long ago that people didn't have this technology available to them to really hear what they sounded like. Imagine what practicing would be like then. That would be really sad. Like, we have so much at our disposal right now that we can pull up YouTube videos or anything on Spotify within a second, and we can record ourselves and hear back within a second. I mean, it's amazing, and we really we should take more advantage of it than we do, I think. And so being able to listen back really helps practicing. But one of the things I find the most intriguing about recording videos for Instagram is it actually puts my mind and body into the performance physical state and mind state, so that I get to practice performing. Because, people ask me a lot about things like stage fright or nerves and how to work on things like that. And I'm always telling them the way to work on it is just to do it as much as possible, perform as much as possible. And yes, it's a little bit different. You're not sitting in front of an audience or standing in front of an audience while you're recording an Instagram video, but it does still get your body and mind into that almost like fight or flight response for a performance. And you get to practice that as much as possible. And that, I've noticed, it helped me in performances as well. So I try to tell people to definitely record themselves also for that reason.
Absolutely. And, I was going to ask you how you maximize the results and bring productivity in your practice. And we've already talked about many aspects, but do you have more examples for us on how you get those results to happen quickly in the practice room?
Well, let me put it this way. I know how to do it better. I don't always actually do it better, which is, like do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. No, I know how to do it better and I should do it better. But what I always tell students is to make a plan before you practice, which is why it's great to have things like practice journals. I don't know if you're familiar with like Two Set Violins practice journal that they have.
I didn't know they had a practice journal.
I think they've linked. Yeah, they started selling a practice journal. I guess they haven't done it too much with it lately, but like a couple years ago. And it has like a layout for each page about like, what are 3 things you want to work on and what are notes that you want to do while you practice, and then like conclusion stuff that you can write down. So it kind of guides you along what to write out. My problem is that when I actually get into writing something, I tend to have too much to write. So there's like not enough space. And that's honestly my problem with so many things is I'm like, I can't do this every day because if I do, I'm going to spend like 30 minutes of my practice time just writing in the journal, which maybe I should just do anyways because it is really productive. But having a plan, knowing what you want to accomplish, some people, for me, a lot of the times that looks like actually writing down the times, how long I'm going to practice something, so that I can put a timer on, be like practice scales for 20 minutes, or like write down practice scales from 1 p.m. to 1:20 p.m. And then I can check that off. Having a list like that is a good plan, but also a more detailed plan of like, what parts of your piece do you want to work on, or what aspect of scales do you want to work on? Do you want to work on tone today? Do you want to work on vibrato today? Do you want to work on bow changes? What do you want to accomplish in this part of the Tchaikovsky concerto? Do you want to make sure that the hand frame works better? Do you want to watch in the mirror to make sure that you're doing this appropriately? Are you going to record this and listen back for intonation? Are you going to practice from with the metronome from 90 to 115 on this spot for 20 minutes? Things like that. Like get as detailed as possible and decide how, because first of all, it makes you think about what you need to practice. Because a lot of times we go into practicing not thinking about what we actually need to do, just thinking I need to do something. So it forces you to slow down and think what's not working, figure out what's not working, write that down, and then figure out a plan to fix it, and then actually execute it and be able to check it off when you're done. And that to me is the most effective way to practice, combined with what I talked about earlier with like warming up and getting your body really comfortable. Because if you're not warmed up and ready to do those things, no matter how much you plan out, if your hands aren't primed to be able to play well, it's not going to help. So the warming up and the priming combined with the plan, and you can probably get it down into a pretty compact, succinct list, which you can do, 4 hours of practicing within an hour to an hour and a half if you plan it well.
That's so true. One tool I've discovered recently, thanks to another guest on the podcast, is the Modacity app. I don't know if you've ever heard about it.
I don't think so. What is it?
You should check it out today because it has everything you just mentioned. So you can create a practice playlist. You can take notes. It has a timer incorporated in it. And the record button is always accessible and it's so easy. It has automatic playback and delete. So I find myself recording myself constantly with it. It has a pretty cool metronome that they call the drone tuner, I think, because Metrodrone, that's what it is. They have this pretty cool Metrodrone function, and also a mindful practice setting where you can send prompts to yourself, prompt yourself to practice tone, and they make suggestions on things to focus on, or you can create your own, type them in there, and at the end of the day, you get all of your stats. You can get the stats for the week. And there's a star system where if you want to keep track of your progress, you can give yourself some stars and see if you're reaching your goal. It's pretty cool. I have to say that for me, it really feels as though I was describing it as though it brings, it sets my mind for mindful practice the second I turn the app on. So I've been enjoying this app a lot.
I'm looking at it, like I just downloaded it and it's free, which is amazing. I mean, it seems like they're in-app purchases, but this is amazing. This literally looks like a bunch of the different apps that I've downloaded, like metronomes and things like keeping track of stuff and like having lists, like all that stuff all in one. Yeah, that looks amazing. I'm definitely going to check this out. That looks super cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I've been having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
You just mentioned apps and metronome and recording. Do you have a favorite practice tool in the practice room?
Probably. I mean, just my phone for recording in general. But I mean, I'll see this new one, but I always use Metro Timer for my metronome and Clear Tune for tuning stuff. And do you know the drone tuner?
Yes.
Drone tuner is really neat. And my recording stuff I just do with the regular camera and everything. But it's hard because like even with the Modacity one that you're talking about, it's hard because I do really find that I can have more productive sessions like if I can really get the electronics out of my space.
That's true.
Which is hard because it's like, well, I want to use these tools because they'll help me be efficient, but I also know, I guess it just depends. You go from one day to the next. Like maybe one day I'll use electronics in a practice session. Another day I'll be like, put everything on silent and do not disturb and put them in another room. I know my teacher at Rice always insisted that we keep our phones like in our lockers, like when we go practice, which I don't know if anyone really implemented that, but that was, he wanted to make sure that we were not getting distracted, which is really important. And especially because of all the social media work that I do and everything, it is beyond easy to get distracted by any kind of notifications coming in or things that I think about that I'm like, oh, I need to remember to check on that. And I just do it because I think about it at that second. My phone's right there, but it is better when I don't have it there.
We have to master the airplane mode.
Yes, airplane mode, for sure.
And, we talked about fun a little bit earlier. And for me, that's something that's taking a lot more space in my practice than it used to, because I find that if I figure out ways to make practicing more fun and challenging in a enjoyable way, I end up being more productive. Is there ways that you make practicing fun or maybe bring meaning in your practice? I
feel like I keep going back to this, but for me, Bach is one of the things that makes practicing most fun and meaningful and enjoyable to me. If I'm able to put together some sort of fun Instagram video that's combined with practicing, that's something I really enjoy doing that I haven't felt like I've been able to do a lot of lately, being kind of emotionally and mentally overstressed and drained a little bit lately. And I want to figure out how to do that because it is, like you say, it's really important. And teachers who are able to combine that aspect of fun with discipline, I just have the utmost respect for them. I'm just like, you are amazing. Teach me how to do that. Because I know I can definitely get a little bit bogged down with either one of the things, and I don't always feel like I combine them as well as I'd like to. And having joy in your practicing and your performing and just joy in general about music and what you do in life definitely helps you learn better, helps you create those mental synapses faster, and which will help you, learn more easily, be more productive, have better performances. And I think we kind of downplay that. I mean, maybe not downplay, but don't promote that idea as much, that you need to have fun when you're doing your work. I think we think well, it's work. We're not supposed to be having fun. So I think just looking for that fun in anything you can do. Sometimes that'll be me practicing something and just noticing all of a sudden hey, this piece is literally this part that I played literally sounds like this other piece. There's this really funny part in the second movement of the Shostakovich Violin Concerto, number 1, that literally has like the exact same notes as Moon River. And I was just like, what is happening here? This is really weird, because like those two things like juxtaposed next to each other are something you'd never think of. And so just, I don't know, always looking for the joy and humor and stuff. Sometimes I can find humor in some like severe slip up that I have in practicing, just be like, what was that? Like, that was the most ridiculous thing ever, and just like laugh about it instead of getting frustrated,
Yeah.
And I think that applies. That goes for performing as well, for sure. I know people get down on themselves a little more, too much, and then that really takes the joy out of music making.
Mm-hmm. And, speaking of performance, you've mentioned how to face your performance anxiety by performing a lot more. And do you have specific ways that you prepare mentally when you are preparing for a performance?
So when people talk to me about nervousness and stage fright, and I mentioned before that I always tell them they need to just practice performing as much as possible, I know that this is true because, like I mentioned earlier, that I had to take off 1 year to 2 years from playing concerts. And honestly, before that time, I never really experienced what I think people are describing when they talk about stage fright. I'd been performing since I was 4, and so I was used to getting on stage and playing every month, or, sometimes multiple times a month, from a really young age. And so it was pretty natural to me to walk on stage and play in front of an audience of, 50 to 2,000 people. Then when I had to take off time from performing and I came back to performing, suddenly it felt a lot different. Suddenly I felt this kind of panic and sick feeling and shakiness and all those things that people would describe to me. And I said, is this what people are talking about when they talk about stage fright? Because this is awful. I remember the first couple of concerto performance that I had coming back to performing. And I was on stage playing the piece and thinking, this is a nightmare. Thinking, this is horrible. If this is the way it's always going to be, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And it was really terrifying. I'm kind of laughing about it, but it was really scary. Especially because I knew that I had been fine before, and then suddenly had this feeling and this panic that was overwhelming. But it did get better. I mean, I'm back now. When I perform, I feel like I did when I was younger, before I had to take off the time. And I know that's just because I put in the 50 to 100 performances, but from the time from 2013 to 2018 now, or I don't know how many, it's probably more than that, but mm-hmm. And just knowing that it got better every time I got on stage, every time I went out and played something, it got better. That's how I know that the practicing of the performing really is what's important, because you just learn your body's responses to stress, and then you learn what you're able to cope with, what you're not able to cope with, and how to channel that energy into your playing. What I would always tell people before was I don't feel nervous. I just have this kind of excited energy that if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to perform. And I know that also because I have tried using beta blockers twice in my life, I think, for performances. And both times when I did, it was I felt like I was just sitting in my room on the computer somewhere, except I was standing on stage in front of people. And it was the most bizarre, I couldn't get into the performance zone. Mm-hmm. And I felt so disconnected. And it was while I was calm, it was not a good feeling, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is the answer. I think the answer is you need to have that energy. You need to have that excitement and that kind of nervous energy for a performance to be meaningful, for it to be effective, for it to impact people and yourself, because, you perform for other people, but it's also, part of nourishing your own soul. I think as performing musicians, that's a part of what we do. And so just performing a lot as much as possible, which goes into the whole thing I talked about with recording yourself. And then just knowing before a performance, what you respond well to. Like, I know that I can't really eat a whole lot, like definitely not a full meal, probably about like 5-ish hours before a concert, because I'll feel too sluggish or I'll feel kind of sick. Knowing what kind of things you can eat, knowing that you need to have a lot of water around you, knowing you need to get a really good night's sleep the night before, whether that means you don't get as much practicing in as you want, that you need that rest. Knowing, the week of a concert, how to kind of space out your practicing in a way that you'll be ready by the concert day. Knowing things about like what you're going to wear is comfortable. Are your shoes comfortable? Is the dress you're wearing comfortable? Is the jacket you have on, does that work? All these kind of little tiny details you start learning more and more as you perform, and you start feeling more and more comfortable when you're on stage. So I think that's kind of just what I've learned in that regards.
It's such a great reminder because, especially for young musicians, maybe still in college out there, because sometimes we prepare a whole semester for a jury or a studio recital, and the school cannot, there's so many things that we need to do while we're in school. The school cannot provide us with unlimited amount of performance opportunities. And I think that if the students could think about that and take ownership of this and really set up performances for themselves, because it's so true what you say. And as you use the word channel, you channel this energy into your playing. The only way to know what that energy feels like and how to channel it, as you explained so eloquently, you need to do it. You need to experience it and learn from it. And that's something that I think if each students could really, start concert cycles and start playing for each other and just really seek out performance opportunities or create them when they don't exist to really get this experience of practicing. Thank you so much for sharing this. This was really great.
Yeah. And in that regard about performing as much as possible in school, I know that both schools I went to, my teachers had weekly studio classes. And I know there were a lot of students within the studio who didn't necessarily want to play, like didn't want to perform. But that's a great place. Like, I try to take advantage, like every week. I was like, I need to play something every week because I get to practice performing. Mm-hmm. And so I think things like that, if you have a weekly studio class or a bi-weekly studio class, like try to have something ready to play like every time. Is going to be one of your best tools to use to practice performing.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a performance ritual now?
Not really. I think it's just kind of what I was mentioning before, like knowing what I can and can't eat, knowing when, knowing how much time I need to feel prepared, knowing whether I need to take like a nap the afternoon before a concert or things like that. I just basically feel like I try to listen to my body as much as possible, and do what it needs to do to feel comfortable for the concert, which honestly lately haven't needed as much. I feel a lot more comfortable just feeling like I can go on stage at any moment and perform, which I think really just comes from the practice of doing that. I know some people have different rituals about like, I need to eat this thing before, I need to do this for this many minutes before. And I can get too much in my head about that. So I try not to focus on things like that. And I think it's more helpful for me.
It's knowing what we need and what works best for ourselves.
Yeah.
Chloe, this is such incredible and valuable information for the listeners of the podcast. Thank you so much. How about a round of rapid fire questions before we wrap this up?
Yeah, sounds good.
So for the people who are dreaming of a career that resembles yours, can you tell us a little bit about what your life looks like?
Craziness. My life looks different every day, which is probably the most frustrating and exciting thing at the same time, because it's hard to make plans. I can have days where I have nothing except needing to practice and needing to work on Instagram and some social media things and maybe see, some of my friends. And then I have other days where I'm traveling all day to go to a concert, other days where I have rehearsals. I still do some gigging in terms of like I sub with the Dallas Symphony a lot. So I get to do that, which is amazing. master classes. I don't teach as much privately now as nowhere near as much as I used to, or as much as I would like right now, but my life is not scheduled or not organized. It's not consistent enough to be able to teach weekly lessons to the same people all the time, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's basically a lot of chaos, and I'm still trying to figure out how to minimize that, because it's really challenging. It's fun, but it can get overwhelming at times for sure. It's definitely not as glamorous as people would think. If people think it is, I feel like people probably think it is. It's not, but it was fun.
What skills do you think young musicians studying today should acquire in addition to learning to play their instrument?
Learning to be nice people. That's definitely something that I feel like we don't put enough emphasis on, especially as musicians, because we spend so much of our time just practicing by ourselves in a practice room. Learning how to be social and how to make new friends, make acquaintances, be good colleagues and role models to other people. That was something that I feel like I kind of had to learn the hard way. Like in my undergrad at CIM, I did not make as much of an effort to meet people or go out with people and like make connections and have fun and stuff as I think I should have. And that definitely contributed a lot to my overall stress and unhappiness at that time, I think. And, we need human connection, and we need to learn to be kind to people. And we need to learn how to balance our lives so that we can have that and also be productive in our craft. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things to figure out, which I still feel like I'm trying to figure out. And we need that also for our craft anyways, because, if we're not nice people, we're not going to be able to make those connections and learn from other people. That's another thing, like learning to have an open mind and always being the eternal student,
Yes.
Anyone can teach you something. Like everyone has something to teach you. Just learning to be just the best person that you can be, and not necessarily the best musician. That's one of the things that we definitely try to implement at the Chloe Trevor Music Academy, because that's one of the things I had to learn. Like I said, I had to learn the hard way, and I think really is the most important thing for musicians, for any career, probably for life in general. It's just not taking so seriously that you can't be a good person first.
What a great answer. Chloe, is there a performance that has stayed with you throughout the years, and why?
Probably the one that I'll never forget is when I performed the Tchaikovsky violin concerto with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra at the Meyerson Symphony Center in, I believe it was 2007, I think. That was an amazing performance for me. The Dallas Symphony is an orchestra that I've literally grown up with. Mm-hmm. Like I've been at concerts since I was 2 weeks old. And for that concert, my mom and my teacher, Arkady Fomin, were both on stage with me playing in the orchestra. And in 2014, my teacher passed away from colon cancer. And this past summer, my mom passed away from breast cancer. And so just like remembering that performance, that they were there with me, getting to play with me, and like and that was my dream too, was to be able to play a solo with that orchestra. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they got to share that dream with me is something I'll never forget. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, for sure.
Oh, wow. That's a very moving memory. Sorry to follow this with such a down-to-earth question, but do you have a favorite book that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
I have 2 books that I would really like to recommend that kind of go into the whole mindfulness thing. And I loved these books even before you messaged me about this podcast. One is The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And the other is Talent is Overrated by Geoff Colvin. And they both, they're practical books, they're self-improvement and business type books, but they are, to me, some of the most motivational and inspiring things to read because they talk about how you become successful at something, like why some athletes and some musicians, like, you know, have skyrocketed to success in their abilities and why other people haven't, you know, and people like to look at those people like, I don't know, Yo-Yo Ma and Michael Jordan, like, for example, and say like, well, they must just be more talented and more whatever than the rest of us, right? But these books talk about it's not talent, it's the fact that they did, you know, these things XYZ with this environment and put it to that test. And so I think it talks a lot about being mindful of what you do, being mindful of what you think, being mindful of how you practice. I always try to tell students things like, every time you play something, you're practicing it. And you might, if you play it sloppily, you're teaching yourself how to play it sloppily. And if you play it really accurately and precisely, you're teaching yourself to do that. So you kind of like always have this meter going of like, we'll play it more times super accurately, and like the fewer amount of times you can play it sloppily, then you have a greater percentage of doing it well in performance, right?
I call that anti-practicing.
Yes. Like one of the things I had to learn was that I couldn't just take a new concerto and try to play through it like quote unquote for fun, right? Because that's the first time I'm doing it. I'm like already teaching myself how to play it. And if I don't do it right, if I play this one shift and I miss it the first time, I've already like taught myself how to miss that shift, you know? So things like that. There, I mean, obviously the books go into a lot of other aspects and things, but I think they're very inspiring and motivational to me because they kind of talk about how anyone can achieve success. Like, don't look at it as like someone has been granted this God-given gift that no one else can attain. Like, no, we can all attain it if we use our brains appropriately.
Yeah, great books. Is there a piece of advice that was given to you that you would like to pass on to the listeners?
To take every performance as an opportunity to learn and grow, whether that means you have a bad performance or a great performance, because you'll learn something from either one of those, and to not get so overly critical that you can't realize that you're actually touching someone in that audience. Someone in that audience is having a really emotional and spiritual connection with you and what you're doing on stage, whether or not you think you're having the most horrible performance of your life. So always approach every performance with grace and humility, no matter how it goes. You know, if you go off stage and someone tells you had a great performance, like, never have this attitude of, it wasn't that great tonight, or I messed this up, or I had this, you know, like, people aren't thinking that. People aren't coming up to you and telling you did a great job because they think you did poorly, right? Someone will always be inspired by what you've done. And I think that's what we need to focus on more when we perform, rather than thinking, oh, I missed this shift. Oh, I forgot this part of the music. Oh, I did this or this. People don't remember those things. Only you remember those things. Everyone else in the audience and in the orchestra or whoever's listening to you will only remember how you made them feel when you played.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important things to remember as a performing musician.
This is such great advice. It's a great reminder to really step outside of ourselves. And I think we forget that too much. We so focused on how we've achieved whatever goal we had in that performance and forget that it really is exactly the way you put it. This someone else is having an experience with this performance, and that's what they'll take away with them. Great advice. Thank you so much. Chloe, do you have a quick actionable tip that the listeners could implement today in their musical lives?
Yes, I think everyone should try to actively listen to a lot more music and recordings of their instrument. So for me, you know, I grew up constantly listening nonstop to recordings of Hilary Hahn and Gil Shaham. because those things, listening to recordings like that will help you in a lot of things. It'll help you in your musicality. It'll help you in your intonation. It'll help you in your tone quality. I personally feel like my sound is the most similar to those musicians that I listen to the most. Not that it's like a replica of them, but it's like that maybe cutting tone that you hear in like Hillary's playing or something about the vibrato and Gil Shaham's playing, like comes out a little bit in my own. And I think that's literally just because I listen to their stuff so much, that my brain really took that on and started figuring out, this is what I want it to sound like. How do I make that happen? And if you're not listening actively to recordings and performances and things, you don't know what you're striving for. You're just kind of mindlessly playing and thinking, I know it wanted to sound good, but what does good mean, right? Good is arbitrary unless you have a goal in mind. So I think like listening to recordings with goal-oriented ears is probably the advice that I would give.
That's fantastic. Chloe, are there any noteworthy project you're currently working on and would like listeners to know about?
Well, the Chloe Trevor Music Academy 2019 is probably the biggest project I have coming up, which will be next summer. And I'm still working on recording a new solo album with my pianist, Jonathan Tsai. We'll see if that finally comes to fruition this spring. It was something that we wanted to do last spring and didn't quite happen for various reasons. I have a lot of exciting concerts coming up, some in Mexico and Houston, and one that may be happening in Ireland in the spring, which is the place I've always wanted to go. So I'm beyond excited for that. Yeah, just there's always new things happening. But right now the camp is probably the biggest project that I have on my plate.
That sounds great. I'm going to put links in the show notes to your website and Instagram page and the Academy's website as well. And I love those videos of you and your pianist, so keep them coming.
Okay, yeah, we need to do more of those for sure.
Chloe, I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time and advice today. You're a great source of inspiration for me, and I think you're a wonderful role model for today's young musicians. I had an amazing time talking with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this chat with Chloe Trevor. There are so many things she said in today's episode that really resonated with me, and I loved how she described what challenging ourselves to record and post a practice video can do for our playing. And it's true, right? There's no other way to learn and master performing than by doing it. So if you're on Instagram and feel like having some fun and push yourself out of your comfort zone this week, post a video, tag me at Mind Over Finger, and let me know what the experience was like for you, what you learned from it, or just tag me in a post and let me know what your favorite takeaway from today's show was. As always, you can find the show notes for this episode and more information about mindful practice at mindoverfinger.com. And if you're looking for a community of mindful practice enthusiasts, join the Mind Over Finger tribe at facebook.com/groups/mindoverfingertribe. Next week, I'll be talking to Nick Platoff, Associate Principal Trombone with the San Francisco Symphony. Nick and I had a great conversation talking about his San Francisco audition process before, during, and after. So if you're a young musician thinking of a career in a symphony orchestra and you're wondering what auditioning for a job entails, this is the episode for you. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to head over to iTunes to rate and leave a review. It's very much appreciated, and it will help other musicians and music lovers find the podcast. Again, thank you, and à bientôt!